Let's begin here, because too many believe attraction is only about charm looks or clever words. But there is a deeper current moving beneath all of that, and you can feel it when it happens. It is the shift in the air when someone sees you, not just with their eyes, but with something hidden in their soul. Their breath changes, their voice trembles, a silence lingers too long. These are not small accidents. They are confessions spoken through the body, and often they reveal more truth than words ever could. Before I continue, let me know where you're listening from in the comments. And if reflections like this resonate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, most of us have been taught to trust what is spoken out loud. We listen for declarations, for labels, for clear answers. Yet Jung reminded us that the unconscious never stays silent. What is suppressed in thought appears in gesture, in posture, in sudden nervousness we can't quite explain. The mind may deny what the heart feels, but the body will always whisper its truth. Think for a moment about those encounters that stay with you. Someone enters the room, and the entire atmosphere bends. They speak the same words as anyone else, yet they carry a different weight. You notice their attention holds on you a little longer. You notice the stillness, the pause, the unplanned smile that seems to escape their control. These are not coincidences. They are signals of something stirring beneath the surface. This is where Jung's vision offers clarity. He spoke of the persona, the mask we wear to appear composed, respectable, and control. But when desire and recognition touch us, the mask begins to crack. What rises is not performance, but the shadow, the hidden side that reveals our real longing, our fears, and our vulnerability. Love and attraction do not polish the mask. They unsettle it, exposing the deeper self. That is why attraction often feels contradictory. Someone may act cold or distant, yet their eyes give them away. They may laugh nervously, shift in their seat, or suddenly lose the thread of conversation. These are not signs of weakness. They are proof that something unconscious is trying to break through. So in this opening reflection, we are not chasing surface charm or empty flattery. We are listening for the language beneath language. We are watching for the soul that recognizes itself before the mind can explain. Because when someone is drawn to you, they will not always announce it, but their presence will change in ways they cannot control. And if you can see with the eyes of the soul, you will recognize it. This is the foundation. The subtle glance, the nervous pause, the shift in energy, each is a mirror revealing the truth of what is felt but not yet spoken. And it is here, in these unguarded moments, that the real story of attraction begins. There is always a moment when the familiar begins to tremble. On the surface, everything seems ordinary. The polite smile, the casual greeting, the practiced composure. Yet underneath, something leaks through. A glance lingers too long. A breath becomes shallow. The rhythm of conversation stumbles for reasons no one can name. It is in these subtle breaks that the truth begins to reveal itself. We like to believe that what matters most is what is spoken out loud. We put our faith in declarations and confessions, in sentences that can be repeated and explained. But the soul speaks a different language. It chooses symbols over statements. It reveals itself not in polished words, but in nervous laughter, in silence that stretches beyond comfort, in hands that fidget, because they cannot stay still. Jung often reminded us that the unconscious finds its way to the surface whether or not we give it permission. This is the first fracture, the moment when the persona, the carefully crafted mask each of us wears in public, begins to crack. The persona is designed to protect. It is the role that allows us to navigate family work and society without exposing our most vulnerable depths. Yet when strong feeling arises, when attraction or recognition stirs, the mask grows thin. The unconscious presses forward, and the body betrays what the mouth refuses to say. You can see it in the way someone avoids your eyes only to return to them again and again. You can feel it in the laughter that comes too quickly, or in the silence that suddenly feels heavy. These are not signs of indifference. They are signs of intensity. They are proof that something deeper is at work, something the conscious mind has not yet agreed to acknowledge. The fracture appears because the unconscious will not stay buried. Consider how often we misinterpret these signals. We assume nervousness means disinterest. We believe avoidance is rejection. We take inconsistency as lack of care. Yet, in depth psychology, it is often the opposite. When nothing is at stake, behavior flows easily. But when the soul is stirred, the body falters. The slip, the pause, the contradiction. These are the footprints of hidden desire. Jung described the shadow as the part of ourselves we hide from others and often from ourselves. It contains not only our anger and fear, but also our tenderness, our longing, our unspoken need for connection. When someone awakens attraction in us, the shadow grows restless. Suddenly, the carefully ordered self is unsettled. What has been buried surges upward. The more one tries to maintain control, the more the cracks begin to show. This is why you may notice small gestures that make no sense on the surface. A person grows unusually clumsy, dropping a pen or fumbling with a cup. Their voice changes pitch when they address you, even though it sounds steady with everyone else. Their pupils widen, their chest tightens. Their sentences trail off. These are not coincidences. They are messages from the unconscious spoken in the only way it knows how. The first fracture is unsettling because it challenges the safety of the persona. The mask says, I am calm, I am professional, I am in control. The shadow whispers, I feel more than I can admit. I am drawn. I am unsettled. I am vulnerable. The two voices collide, and the result is contradiction. To the untrained eye, contradiction looks like confusion. But to the one who listens with the ear of the soul, it is revelation. In these moments, we encounter the human tendency to suppress what feels dangerous. To desire is to risk rejection. To reveal longing is to expose one's own weakness. So the mouth remains silent. The mask stays in place, yet the body rebels. This rebellion is gentle but insistent. It does not shout, but it refuses to be ignored. And the more one resists, the more obvious the fracture becomes. Think of how attraction is often depicted as smooth, confident, effortless. Yet Jungian psychology tells a different story. True attraction unsettles. It interrupts the performance of the persona. It brings to the surface not just beauty and charm, but awkwardness, hesitation, and fear. Love and longing are never neat. They are messy because they call forth the parts of us we least control. Here lies the paradox. What feels embarrassing on the outside is often the clearest sign of sincerity. A stumble, a blush, a silence heavy with meaning. These are the cracks where the light of truth shines through. The persona may resist, but the unconscious does not lie. In the fracture, we glimpse what is real. The first fracture is not only about the other, it is also about you. To notice these signals requires a willingness to see beyond surface roles. It asks you to suspend judgment, to look not at what is rehearsed, but at what escapes rehearsal. When you can do this, you begin to read the language of the soul. You begin to understand that contradiction is not the absence of feeling, but the overflow of it. This awareness changes how we interpret human connection. Instead of demanding clarity in words, we learn to watch the spaces between them. Instead of dismissing nervousness, we recognize it as intensity. Instead of labeling avoidance as rejection, we see it as fear of vulnerability. The fracture becomes not a flaw, but a doorway. Through it, the deeper truth waits. In the Jungian view, this fracture is the first invitation to individuation. Individuation is the lifelong process of integrating shadow and persona, of uniting the mask with the hidden self. When attraction cracks the mask, it offers an opportunity to face the truth of one's own feelings or continue to hide behind performance. Many turn away. Some step through. Either way, the fracture marks a turning point. The first fracture is both tender and dangerous. Tender because it reveals longing. Dangerous because it exposes what has been hidden. Yet without fracture, there can be no growth. A mask that never cracks becomes a prison. A shadow that never stirs becomes a weight we carry without knowing. Only when the unconscious breaks through do we have a chance to see what is really alive within us. So let us not rush past these signs. The nervous laugh, the glance quickly stolen, the pause that feels heavier than silence. Each is a confession disguised as accident. Each is the unconscious saying, "Here I am, I feel, I cannot stay hidden." To recognize this is not to judge or to demand, it is simply to witness. And when you witness, you begin to see the fracture for what it is, not weakness, but honesty. Not confusion, but revelation. It is the soul's first whisper that something more is present, waiting to be acknowledged. The first fracture is the moment when the outer mask and the inner truth no longer fit together. It is uncomfortable, often embarrassing, and yet deeply human. It is the signal that attraction has moved beyond words, that the unconscious has entered the room. And in that moment, everything changes. When the first fracture appears, the mask no longer holds as firmly as it once did. What follows is the deeper struggle, the clash between the persona, the mask we show the world, and the shadow, the hidden life we keep below the surface. This is where attraction, longing, or even simple recognition begins to stir a person in ways they cannot control. It is not smooth. It is not perfect. It is full of contradictions. The persona wants to appear composed, collected, respectable. It insists on dignity, balance, and control. But the shadow is restless. It carries the fears, desires, and wounds that have been buried for years. When someone awakens a strong response in us, the shadow rises quickly, breaking through the polished surface. The result is inconsistency. A warm glance followed by sudden withdrawal. A gentle word replaced by sarcasm. Laughter that covers anxiety. To the ordinary eye, this looks confusing. To Jung, it was the most revealing part of human connection. The shadow is not evil. It is simply the part of ourselves we refuse to claim. Within it lives the tenderness we once suppressed, the passion we denied, the insecurity we never healed. When someone reflects back, the pieces of ourselves we have hidden, we do not know how to respond. The mask says, stay calm, stay controlled. The shadow says, this matters more than you will admit. And between these two voices, a person trembles. Think of how this contradiction often appears in daily life. A man or woman may act distant, pretending they are unaffected, but their eyes betray a different truth. They may speak casually, yet their voice softens only in your presence. They may try to carry on as normal, but the air thickens when you enter the room. These inconsistencies are not proof of indifference. They are the marks of an inner battle, the persona fighting to maintain control while the shadow insists on being seen. Jung wrote that everything we refuse to recognize in ourselves will eventually appear in our lives as fate. This is why attraction unsettles us so deeply. It is not simply about another person. It is about what they awaken in us. The other becomes a mirror reflecting both the beauty and the unfinished business we have carried silently. And the more powerful the mirror, the more intense the contradictions. The persona is fragile when it meets love. We may keep it polished in the boardroom, with family, or among acquaintances, but in the presence of someone who reaches beneath the surface, the mask begins to lose strength. A slip of the tongue, a defensive remark, a nervous laugh, all these reveal the fracture, and the more one tries to cover the cracks, the more obvious they become. This is why real attraction often looks messy. Not because it is false, but because it is true. The shadow does not rise politely. It rises with force. It makes the hands tremble, the words falter, the emotions contradict themselves. The persona resists, but the shadow pushes through. And this tension between the mask and the hidden self is what gives attraction its unique intensity. For many, this conflict feels unbearable. The mask offers safety. If I stay in control, no one can hurt me. The shadow threatens exposure. If I admit what I feel, I may be rejected. I may lose face. I may confront old wounds. So the person oscillates, leaning close one moment, retreating the next, opening a door, then slamming it shut. Warmth followed by coolness. Presence followed by absence. This pattern is not a game. It is the visible struggle of the psyche. The observer often misreads this dance. We think if they cared, they would act clearly. If they were honest, they would speak plainly. But Jung reminds us that clarity is not always possible when the shadow is at work. The unconscious does not speak in straight lines. It speaks in contradictions, in symbols and mixed signals that reveal the truth by refusing to stay hidden. To understand this stage is to develop compassion. We begin to see that awkwardness and inconsistency are not flaws to be mocked, but signs of something powerful stirring. They show that the mask is cracking, that the hidden life is rising to the surface. And while this may be frustrating or confusing, it is also profoundly human. When attraction activates the shadow, it does more than reveal desire. It also reveals fear. Fear of exposure, fear of rejection, fear of vulnerability. The stronger the attraction, the greater the fear. And so the person behaves in ways that make little sense, teasing when they wish to be tender, withdrawing when they wish to be close, acting irritated when they long for connection. This is not dishonesty. It is self-protection. The persona is trying desperately to hold on even as the shadow pushes to be known. In the Jungian vision, this conflict is necessary. Without the shadow rising, there is no chance for growth. Without the persona resisting, there is no stability. It is the tension between the two that creates the possibility of individuation, the process of becoming whole. In the struggle between mask and shadow, the soul begins to ask, who am I really when I stop performing? What do I actually feel when I allow the hidden part of me to speak? This stage is not comfortable, but it is essential. It is the crucible in which authenticity is forged. If the persona never cracks, we remain trapped in performance. If the shadow never rises, we remain cut off from our deepest truths. But when they collide, something new can be born. You may have noticed this in your own encounters. When someone is drawn to you, their energy shifts in unpredictable ways. Sometimes they seem more generous, more attentive, more protective than usual. At other times, they withdraw, creating distance without explanation. These contradictions can be painful if taken at face value, but seen through Jung's lens, they reveal the psyche in motion, the battle between who we think we should be and who we actually are. The shadow is not only personal, it is also collective. It carries cultural messages about what is acceptable, what is forbidden, what is considered strong or weak. When attraction stirs the shadow, it often awakens shame. I should not feel this much. I should not long for what I long for. And so the persona doubles down, insisting on composure. But the body still betrays the truth. And the more one denies it, the louder the unconscious becomes. Here, the challenge is not to judge, but to witness. To recognize that nervousness, awkwardness, and contradiction are not signs of failure, but signs of depth. They tell us that something real is happening beneath the surface. Something that threatens the mask, but promises growth. Jung believed that love was not only a gift, but also a demand. It asks us to face what we would rather keep hidden. It brings old wounds into the light. It exposes the places where the persona no longer fits. That is why attraction can feel overwhelming. It is not just about another person. It is about meeting ourselves in the mirror they provide. This stage of contradiction is the very heart of the story. It is where longing meets fear, where vulnerability meets defense, where the soul insists on truth, while the mask insists on order. And though it feels chaotic, it is the necessary tension through which transformation begins. So, when you see this in another, the nervousness, the inconsistency, the strange mixture of closeness and distance, look deeper. Do not dismiss it as confusion. See it as revelation. Understand that the shadow is speaking, that the persona is trembling, and that the soul is in motion. The mask will always try to maintain its place. The shadow will always press forward. And in that meeting, the human heart reveals itself most clearly. This is not weakness. This is life unfolding at its deepest level. After the tension between mask and shadow, something new begins to stir. The struggle cannot continue forever. Either the mask hardens and the soul retreats, or an awakening occurs, a moment of recognition that changes everything. This awakening is not loud. It is not dramatic. It arrives quietly like dawn light, breaking through a half-closed curtain. It does not erase the conflict, but it reframes it. Suddenly, what once seemed like contradiction begins to make sense. Awakening happens when you stop looking only with the eyes of reason and begin to see with the eyes of the soul. Reason measures, categorizes, and demands clear proof. The soul perceives symbols, atmospheres, and silent truths that cannot be captured by logic alone. This shift in vision is what Jung called the beginning of individuation, the turning inward to discover the reality of the self rather than clinging to appearances. Attraction and recognition become the teachers here. What unsettled us now reveals its meaning. The nervous laughter, the restless body language, the strange silences were not signs of confusion, but signals of depth. When seen with the soul's vision, they point to the truth that love does not operate on the surface. It reaches into the hidden places and brings them forward not to shame us, but to heal. Jung often reminded us that the unconscious speaks in images and dreams. And when two people meet in this charged way, the experience feels almost dreamlike. You may feel as though time slows down. You may sense that this meeting has happened before, though you cannot explain why. These are not illusions. They are symbols of a deeper reality. Synchronicities, Jung would say, that hint at the mysterious language of the psyche. This is the awakening to recognize that attraction is not simply personal preference or fleeting chemistry, but the soul reaching towards something it longs to integrate. The other becomes a mirror not only of desire, but of forgotten potential, unlived tenderness, or buried courage. In their presence, we remember what we have lost touch with in ourselves. Many people fear this realization. To admit that another awakens something within us is to confess vulnerability. Yet, it is in this very vulnerability that awakening begins. Because when the mask slips and the shadow rises, we are finally brought into contact with the deeper truth of who we are. The persona says I am in control. The shadow says I am incomplete. But the awakening whispers, wholeness is possible. Think of how your perception changes when you allow yourself to see in this way. Suddenly, the awkwardness of another is no longer embarrassing, but endearing. Their silence is not rejection, but the weight of unspoken feeling. Their contradictions are not evidence of dishonesty, but of depth. By looking with the eyes of the soul, you begin to hear the language of symbols, the language the unconscious has been speaking all along. This awakening also reveals the role of archetypes. Jung described how within each of us live universal patterns: the lover, the child, the sage, the warrior. In moments of profound attraction, these archetypes stir. A woman may embody the anima for a man awakening his hidden feminine side. A man may embody the animus for a woman stirring her inner masculine. These encounters feel larger than life because they touch something beyond the personal. They activate the archetypal dimension of the psyche, reminding us that love is not only between two individuals, but also between the conscious and the unconscious within. To see this is to understand why attraction feels both thrilling and frightening. It is thrilling because it connects us to a greater whole, frightening because it demands that we face what has been sleeping within us. The body trembles not only from desire, but from recognition. The eyes linger not only in admiration, but in memory. Something ancient has awakened, and the soul knows it. Awakening also changes how we experience time. Encounters become charged with meaning. A passing glance feels eternal. A brief silence feels like a revelation. Jung called this synchronicity the meaningful coincidence that hints at a deeper order. When you think of someone and they appear, when your paths cross again and again without planning, these are not accidents. They are reminders that the unconscious is shaping the path, guiding toward integration. But let us be clear. Awakening is not about fantasy or idealization. It is not about clinging to another to complete yourself. It is about realizing that what you see in them is also within you. They are a mirror, not a savior. They awaken, but it is you who must integrate. This distinction matters. Without it, projection can trap us in illusion. With it, projection becomes the doorway to growth. Here the shadow begins to lose its terror. What once felt threatening now appears as material for integration. The awkwardness, the fear, the hidden longing. These are no longer enemies, but guides. They point to the work of individuation to bring the hidden into the light, to allow the self to become whole. Attraction is simply the spark that ignites this process. In practical terms, this awakening softens our perception. We stop demanding that others act perfectly clear. We begin to sense the depth behind their contradictions. We become patient with silences tender, with nervousness open to the subtle ways the soul reveals itself. This patience allows the deeper connection to unfold without forcing. It allows love to be what it truly is, a slow unveiling of the self through the mirror of another. The awakening also shows us the difference between appearance and essence. The persona may still try to act in control, but we no longer mistake the mask for the truth. We see the tremor in the voice, the shift in energy, the sudden warmth in the eyes. We recognize these as signs of the soul speaking. And once you learn to see in this way, you cannot unsee. The world becomes filled with subtle confessions, silent exchanges, symbolic gestures that carry more weight than words ever could. To awaken in this way is also to confront the responsibility that comes with awareness. If you see with the eyes of the soul, you must treat what you see with reverence. You cannot exploit another's vulnerability, nor can you deny your own. The awakening demands honesty, patience, and compassion. It asks you to honor the depth that has been revealed, even if it unsettles the surface of your life. This is why Jung saw awakening not as an escape, but as a beginning. It is the moment when you realize that love and attraction are not random accidents, but meaningful encounters calling you toward growth. It is when you understand that every contradiction, every fracture, every nervous gesture carries a message from the unconscious. And if you are willing to listen, the soul will show you the way forward. So awakening is not a sudden blaze of certainty, but a gentle turning of the gaze. You stop demanding explanations, and you begin to recognize symbols. You stop clinging to appearances, and you begin to see essence. You stop fearing contradiction, and you begin to trust that truth often speaks in paradox. From this point on, the story of attraction changes. It is no longer about hiding behind masks or being trapped by the shadow. It becomes about learning to live with eyes wide open, to recognize what stirs within, and to honor the truth that has been revealed. This is the gift of awakening, not a final answer, but a new way of seeing. And once this vision begins, it carries you forward. The shadow still speaks, the persona still resists, but now you have a deeper clarity. You know that what unsettles you is also what can heal you. You know that the mirror another provides is also your own reflection. You know that awakening is not about possession, but about integration. This is the moment when love ceases to be only personal desire and becomes a path of individuation. The soul awakens not only to another, but to itself. And in that awakening, the possibility of true transformation begins. Awakening opens the door, but it does not decide the path. Awareness alone is not enough. Once you see the truth beneath the mask, once you recognize the pull of the shadow and the mirror of the other, you are faced with a choice. Do you continue circling in contradiction, or do you name what is happening and set a clear course? This moment, Jung would say, is where individuation truly begins. The unconscious may stir, and symbols may speak, but the conscious self must still respond. Without response, we drift. With response, we integrate. And response always takes the form of a boundary. A boundary is not a wall. It is a shoreline. It tells the current, here is where I stand. Here is how I choose to meet you. In this act of definition, the soul moves from confusion toward clarity. For many, this feels frightening. To set a boundary seems like risking rejection. To admit what you will and will not accept feels like exposing too much. Yet this is the only way the awakening becomes transformation. Without the boundary, we remain trapped in endless projection, carried by the unconscious, without direction. With the boundary, we step into alignment with the deeper self. Think of how attraction plays out without this step. One person circles the other, with nervousness leaning close and then retreating. The signals grow intense, but unclear. The mask fights the shadow presses, and the dance repeats. It becomes an endless cycle of longing without grounding. But when a boundary is set, whether through honesty pacing or deliberate restraint, the cycle changes. It no longer spins on contradiction. It finds shape. Boundaries are not about controlling the other. They are about clarifying the self. They say, "This is how I honor what I feel. This is what respect looks like for me. This is how my soul chooses to move forward." In Jung's terms, it is the ego cooperating with the self, the conscious mind listening to the deeper center and shaping action accordingly. This is where love shifts from impulse to standard. Impulse says, "I want." Standard says, "I value." Impulse is driven by craving. Standard is guided by dignity. To set a boundary is to live by standard rather than impulse. It is to say, "I do not confuse longing with surrender. I do not mistake intensity for truth. I will let the shadow speak, but I will not let it rule." For example, when someone acts inconsistent, the unbounded self may chase clarity, demanding reassurance from the other. But the bounded self waits, watching the contradiction without becoming consumed by it. The unbounded self accepts crumbs, mistaking them for a feast. The bounded self sets a clear limit. If you mean it, you will show it. If you do not, I will not linger. In this shift, the center of power changes. No longer does the unconscious pull us in every direction. The conscious self names the current and chooses the shore. Jung taught that individuation requires confrontation with the shadow, but also the discipline of form. Without form, the shadow overwhelms. With form, the shadow is integrated. Boundaries are the form through which the energy of attraction becomes constructive rather than destructive. They allow desire to serve growth instead of chaos. This is not coldness. It is warmth with clarity. A boundary does not kill love. It purifies it. It ensures that what remains is not manipulation, not projection alone, but genuine connection. For when you say no to what is false, you make room for what is true. Consider how the body feels when boundaries are absent. The heart races, the mind spins, the stomach tightens. You are pulled back and forth by signals you cannot trust. It is exhausting. Now consider the body when boundaries are set. The breath slows, the spine straightens, the gaze steadies. Even if uncertainty remains, the self feels anchored. This is the difference between living in the storm and standing at the shoreline. To set a boundary is also to honor the archetype of the sovereign, the inner ruler who governs life not by fear, but by inner law. When the sovereign archetype awakens, you stop asking, "Do they want me?" and begin asking, "What is right for me?" You stop chasing signs outside, and you start listening to the voice within. This shift is not selfishness. It is self-respect. And self-respect is the soil in which real love can grow. Boundaries also reveal the truth of the other. When you no longer bend endlessly, you find out what they are willing to offer. If they meet your standard with honesty, connection deepens. If they retreat, you are spared the illusion. Either way, you gain clarity. Jung would say that boundaries separate projection from reality. They allow you to see whether what you thought you saw in the mirror is truly present or only your own longing reflected back. This step is not easy. Many hesitate, fearing they will lose what little closeness they have. But in truth, boundaries never destroy what is real. They only dissolve what was false. If love is authentic, it will respect the shoreline you set. If it is only shadow play, it will fade when exposed to the light. Either way, you remain aligned with yourself. Transformation always requires a choice. Not the choice of whether to feel or not to feel that is beyond control, but the choice of how to live with what you feel. Do you allow the unconscious to rule, or do you cooperate with it through conscious standards? Do you remain entangled in projection, or do you draw a line that invites reality to step forward? Boundaries are also acts of compassion. They protect not only you, but the other as well. They prevent you from enabling confusion, and they prevent them from hiding forever behind contradiction. A boundary calls both people into honesty. It asks each to show what is real, not just what is unconscious. This is why Jung placed so much emphasis on the union of opposites. Love must join passion with form, desire with respect, shadow with consciousness. Without boundaries, we fall into chaos. With boundaries, we create the vessel in which love can grow. The container matters as much as the fire it holds. So the act of setting a boundary is not rejection, but integration. It is the point where awakening becomes transformation, where the silent pull becomes a conscious path, where the soul says, I will not be ruled by longing alone. I will honor myself, and in doing so, I will honor the other as well. Think of this as a shift from demand to standard. Demand says, give me what I want. Standard says, I will stand in what I deserve. Demand tries to bend the other. Standard holds its own shape, allowing truth to reveal itself. This shift is the heart of transformation. When you set a boundary, you reclaim the energy once scattered in contradiction. You no longer chase, guess, or beg. You rest in clarity. You invite the other to meet you there. And if they do, the connection becomes real. If they do not, you remain whole. This is the threshold of transformation, the moment when the unconscious pull is honored but not obeyed blindly. When the mask is acknowledged but no longer defines the truth. When the shadow is seen but no longer rules in secret. The self has stepped into alignment. And from that alignment, love is free to either grow honestly or release peacefully. So the choice and the boundary are not the end of the story. They are the turning point. They are the moment when what was once chaotic becomes clear, when what was once unconscious becomes conscious. And in this turning, the soul takes its first step toward freedom. Every journey of the soul ends with a moment of stillness. After the nervous beginnings, after the cracks in the mask, after the long struggle between shadow and persona, there comes a point when the dust settles. What felt chaotic reveals its deeper pattern. What felt overwhelming finds its meaning. This is the quiet resolution, not a dramatic conclusion, but a soft integration that restores balance. We come to see that attraction, longing, and even confusion were never random accidents. They were symbols pointing us towards something essential. The body's tremors, the nervous laughter, the lingering glances, these were not flaws to be corrected. They were signals from the unconscious reminders that the soul will always try to be heard. In Jung's view, what matters is not whether another person responded exactly as we wished, but whether we ourselves learned to listen. Did we see beyond the mask? Did we recognize the shadow without fear? Did we hold our standards with dignity rather than demand? These are the questions that measure growth. The deeper lesson is this: love and attraction are mirrors. They show us what is unhealed, what is hidden, and what is waiting to be integrated. Sometimes the mirror reflects a longing we have denied. Sometimes it shows us our own strength. Sometimes it exposes the wounds we thought we had left behind. And in every case, the mirror calls us to become more whole. When we honor these mirrors, without clinging, we transform. We no longer confuse nervousness with rejection or contradiction with indifference. We learn to see them as the soul's language, awkward, imperfect, but profoundly honest. And with this clarity, we move with more grace. Integration means that the mask and the shadow no longer battle endlessly. The mask softens the shadow steps into light, and the self becomes more unified. Individuation, Jung would say, is not perfection, but wholeness. It is when all parts of the self, the polished, the hidden, the fearful, the loving, are acknowledged and given a rightful place. In practical life, this shows as calm. Instead of chasing mixed signals, you breathe and stand steady. Instead of bending to every impulse, you listen to the deeper voice of the self. You treat others with clarity and yourself with respect. This is the fruit of the journey, not a perfect romance, not a flawless script, but the strength to live from your center. Attraction may remain mysterious. Love will always stir contradictions. But you have learned that confusion does not have to rule you. You have learned that boundaries do not diminish love. They purify it. You have learned that awakening is not about chasing another, but about recognizing the missing parts of your own soul and welcoming them home. Jung once observed that what we repress will return to us as fate. The beauty of integration is that you no longer need fate to repeat the same lesson. You carry the truth consciously now. You know that desire can unsettle you, but it does not have to unseat you. You know that another's gaze may awaken something deep, but it does not have to control your path. You know that every encounter is a chance to grow, not a chain to bind you. This is closure, not in the sense of an ending, but in the sense of harmony. The river of energy that once spilled in every direction now finds its course. The unconscious still whispers, but you can hear it without fear. The shadow still stirs, but you meet it with compassion. And the persona still appears, but it no longer hides the truth. In this balance, love becomes less about possession and more about presence. Less about demanding answers and more about honoring what is revealed. Less about forcing certainty and more about trusting the language of symbols. You begin to live not from impulse, but from essence. The timeless insight here is simple. Every soul we meet is a mirror, and every mirror is a teacher. Some mirrors reveal wounds, others reveal beauty, and all of them reveal the path toward wholeness. To walk this path with patience, courage, and dignity is the essence of individuation. So let us close with this reflection. When someone's presence unsettles you, when their gaze lingers, when your own body betrays a feeling you cannot explain. See it not as weakness, but as truth seeking expression. See it not as chaos, but as the soul asking for integration. And let that recognition guide you toward your own center, where love is no longer a storm, but a steady flame. Before we part, I invite you to reflect. Which part of this journey spoke to you most? Was it the nervous fracture, the struggle of shadow and mask, the awakening of symbols, or the calm of setting a boundary? Share your thoughts in the comments so others may learn from your reflections too. And if these words have touched you, consider liking and subscribing so that more listeners can join in this kind of reflection. Not for numbers, but for the simple truth that wisdom multiplies when it is shared. In the end, love and attraction are not puzzles to be solved, but pathways leading us deeper into ourselves. And every time the mask cracks, every time the shadow rises, every time we set a boundary and stand in our worth, we take one step closer to wholeness. That is the quiet gift of this journey. And may it stay with you long after the words fade.